What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hogmolly Hustle. Had a big week in the NFL last week. Also, some good college games that were on. And right now, we're getting towards the end. Still got a handful of weeks left in the NFL. And we're going to talk about some of those potential outcomes. College football is getting very close to being wrapped up. Got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and look at the recap here. And as I pull out my trusty cell phone, I see that there are about 7 games here last week that were big. Big. So I'm going to run through them. We're going to talk about each of them. Miami over Baltimore. That one surprised me a great deal. I didn't know what to expect from this Miami team, especially during this game when they brought out Brissett. And they said, all right, well, he's hurt. So bring in Tua, who had been hurt. He's hurt. So you're basically rotating with 2 quarterbacks who have been hurt or are hurt. They're able to pull off the win. The Ravens did not look great. And they end up losing to the Dolphins. Now, before the season, I think everybody was talking about how good this Dolphins team is supposed to be and how this is the year that where they take the next step and they compete with the Bills for the division. But, as you see, things have kind of fell to the wayside. Things haven't gone the way they expected, but they can still be a really talented Ravens team. So what do you think about that?
I think that the Ravens need to get it together on offense. They were really dormant in that second and third quarter against Miami. Looking at the stat sheet, the Ravens were 2 of 14 on third down efficiency. That's not going to cut it. Certainly not for a team that has aspirations of winning their division. Giving up 4 sacks to that Miami defense. I mean, kind of like what you were talking about. Miami showed some promise last year of really improving on the defensive side of the ball. Xavier Howard has really improved in man coverage and become one of the better ball hawk corners in the league. Surprised me just as much as it did you. I think that the Ravens were a much better team in that situation. Playing on Thursday might have been, a bit of a factor. I know a lot of NFL guys talk about how the short turnaround is a lot to prepare for and just a lot to endure on your body. So I think that might have been part of it. But Baltimore's got to get it together. That division is certainly tightening up, and heading into Week 11, I mean, you gotta win the games that you're supposed to.
Yeah, and now, going forward, I think this says more about the Ravens being off. There's a couple of things that just don't seem to be playing all that well. Patrick Queen, who had been having a pretty tough year, ended up having a pretty solid week this last week. I do think the Ravens probably bounce back. That division's still in flux, so they're not out of it. They lose. The Browns ended up losing, who we'll talk about next. The Steelers, they're still hanging around, but there's some T.J. Watt questions. The Bengals, who knows what to think of the Bengals at this point. But that division's still in flux. So even though it's a tough loss against Miami, not much has changed in that division. So it's still just kind of a wash type of week. And on to Cleveland. New England beating the brakes off of Cleveland. Now, Cleveland has some issues that they got to address. They still got some issues in the run game. They still have injuries. There's a lot of issues to address for the Cleveland Browns. Still have some issues, but the quarterback talk, the wide receiver talk, there was a trade, of course, or a release. Odell Beckham Jr. was waived and ended up with the LA Rams, which we'll talk about. So a lot of things happening with this Cleveland Browns team, and don't really know how it's going to go out. Again, at the beginning of the season, we looked at the Browns and said, this is going to be the team that dominates the AFC. They're going to beat the Chiefs. They're going to go head-to-head with the Chiefs and be the team to beat. But
they look good on paper.
It does look good on paper. It's like they say. You can build a good team on paper, but you got to win the game when it comes to nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks out to me in that game, again, third down efficiency, 1 of 11. That's just not going to cut it, especially with Baker's shoulder injury. You'd like to see your offense be able to establish the run. But again, it's hard to establish the run if you know that you can't throw the ball downfield. And not having Odell Not saying that he was a catalyst of their offense, but it is a high-profile weapon. And so the fact that he's not around anymore just makes their offense less balanced, I guess. I viewed this game as a potential trap game for Cleveland. It's a team that I think most would agree is probably a little more talented, again, on paper than New England. But, I mean, you got to give credit to Belichick. You got to give credit to that Patriots offense for doing what it did. I'm a fantasy owner and a huge proponent of Ramondre Stevenson, who had a great game filling in for an injured Damian Harris. Very exciting week for him. And, 20 carries, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, got involved in the passing game. If they can get him going, then I like this Patriots offense. I think Jacoby Myers had his first touchdown of his career. Somebody that's had an underrated, kind of underpraised big year receiving. And the Patriots just continue to grind it out. And it looks like they're putting themselves in great position to at least earn a wild card, if not challenge the Bills for that division.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about the Cleveland Browns, but you look at the Patriots, and I said pretty early on in the season that they're a team that could really turn it around. They get a lot of players that they had lost last year to COVID, opt-outs, and various other reasons they lost some players. Of course, they just traded away Stephon Gilmore not too long ago. A lot of things in flux, and for most teams, you'd say, all right, well, they can't really recover from that. But this team's a lot more talented than the team they had last year. And then Mac Jones is playing really well in the system, and he's getting better and better each week. And they look really good. Damian Harris have been playing really well. You talk about Ramondre Stevenson. They got a lot of things going for them. If the Patriots don't make the playoffs, I'll be a little bit more shocked. And if they do make the playoffs, I think
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say with the 3 teams in the playoffs, I think it's a very good chance they get in, especially with the way the AFC is looking right now.
Oh, for sure. And I'll just say this one last note on the Patriots. They currently have a point differential of plus 98, which is very good. Now, that's skewed a little bit because of the wins against the Jets and, of course, this week against the Browns. But their defense is doing a solid job, and it seems like Mac Jones gets more comfortable each and every week. And I think him and Najee Harris are probably, unless I'm mistaken and forgetting someone, probably the front runners for Rookie of the Year right now.
Yeah, I'd have to look at everyone else, but they certainly have to be there at the top going forward. And talking about the AFC before we move on, the AFC is kind of crazy. Now, a few weeks ago, we were included in this. People were going crazy over the AFC, saying, man, look at this. You got the Chargers, you got the Chiefs. The Chiefs are falling apart. You got the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos, all these great teams in the AFC. And then now, as it tends to happen, everything's evening out. Some of the teams that really should be there are getting back to where they should be. The Kansas City Chiefs are getting back to where they should be. And the Patriots are getting back to what they used to be. But, again, they don't have Tom Brady, so they can't be exactly what they used to be. But Mac Jones is playing very, very well. And that is something I like seeing. All right. So we're heading towards Thanksgiving week. And if there's one thing that I want to give thanks for, is for anybody that happens to be tuning in to this and listening to us blabber on and on about football. So if that's you and you're watching this, thank you for watching the Hogmolly Hustle. Like and subscribe if you really like what we're saying. And if you disagree or agree with anything we say, leave a comment up, down, left, right, wherever the comment section is. Another thing that happens on Thanksgiving, people usually eat turkey. You know what turkey does?
Makes you sleepy.
It makes you sleepy. You know what else makes you sleepy? A tie in the NFL. You asked me last week if I thought the Detroit Lions were going to lose every game. And I said, very confidently, that they were not going to lose all their games. And lo and behold, the Lions have, at this point, not lost all their games. Because a tie is not a win, but it's not a loss. So even if they go 0-1, it's still not fully. What do you call a season where you lose all your games?
A defeated season.
Okay, so it's not going to be a defeated season. So, yeah, Detroit and Pittsburgh. Man, what an ugly game that was. Like I turned on there. It was just like watching a Division II. No offense to Division II football, but like a Division II slog fest.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Detroit, it's puzzling that Jared Goff continues to struggle. I think I saw something where he hasn't thrown. I think he's thrown like 2 touchdowns the last 5 games or something like that. 1 touchdown in the last 5 games. So that's not what you like to see. You would like to take advantage of Roethlisberger being out this week, Mason Rudolph coming in at quarterback, and obviously, in my opinion, I don't think that he's the answer, the heir apparent to Big Ben. I think that the Steelers are definitely going to be looking to go quarterback in next year's draft. I'm sure we'll probably talk about that closer to time in the offseason. But it really stinks for Detroit that they couldn't sneak out a win. I thought for sure that they were going to, and then they just couldn't score. I mean, the Steelers' defense, we've seen this the entire year. Their defense just keeps bailing them out. They keep, giving the Steelers a chance and letting them become relevant, and they just keep squeaking out victories, or in this case, ties, to keep them afloat. And so it's better than a loss, but I'm sure that Mike Tomlin is probably upset about that they didn't get a win, even though Roethlisberger was out, because that division is so tight right now.
Yeah. Well, when you are losing all your games from the Detroit side, you talk about Tomlin not being happy with the way this goes. You need to pick up a game like that, especially against a team that hasn't won. You don't want to drop a game, whether it be a loss or a tie. You want to pick up a win to help you, especially when you're division, especially when the Cleveland Browns, the Bengals, the Ravens. You could have had a big, big win here this week.
Especially with the Ravens stumbling on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah. And if you can't get that win over a Lions team that you should win against, that's tough. But if you're Dan Campbell, now I don't know exactly what he said in the locker room, but he has to be happy somewhat that it wasn't a loss. It's all everything. Anything's progress. When you haven't won a game yet, anything closer to winning a game is progress. And being able to go against a good defense, even without their starting quarterback, this is a good team. Mason Rudolph, obviously not the answer, but you got to be happy if you are a Lions fan, and maybe this is the thing that turns it around a little bit, and they can pick up a win or two before the end of the season and really start getting some traction going towards next season and really start building up that morale going forward. Now, I don't know if they will. They could just go back to losing. But this is something to work with. This is more than what they had.
It's the first step, Win over the locker room, build the morale. Second step is to add talent, and the third step is to let it fly. So, I mean, he's trying to establish the groundwork. That's what you got to do.
Yeah. And people, if you were to talk about how much people are talking about the Browns, the potential playoff favorites, if you were to say that about 5-6 years ago, maybe even less time than that, people would say, "Are you crazy? What are you talking about?" But it doesn't take long to flip things up and change things around. And the Lions might have worse luck than the Browns throughout their season, because even some of their best teams, led by Stafford, have fallen short in the playoffs, but it was being carried by him. They had nothing else, but he really shouldn't have been in playoffs in the first place. So this Lions team, this Lions franchise has been through a lot, and maybe they get it turned around, maybe they don't. But it's something to look forward to. And since we're talking about Matthew Stafford, let's talk about what is perhaps not the best version of Matthew Stafford. San Francisco beat the Los Angeles Rams pretty handily. You didn't see the best Matthew Stafford. I still think he's one of the most talented arms in the NFL. But right now, he's just not playing his best ball. Robert Woods going down on injury hurts. OBJ came in and had a couple of big plays, but still is not the guy that he was back in 2013 or wherever it was. He was his top OBJ. So we'll see what goes from there. Cooper Kupp is still putting up good stats. So right now we don't really know what to expect from the Rams. Everybody's getting all up in the Rams. They're saying Von Miller, OBJ, Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford. This is it. This is the great dream team. But you got to get Von Miller on the field. You got to get OBJ making plays. And Robert Woods going down really, really hurts me. Because Robert Woods is, to access the cliche archive, he's a grinder. He works hard throughout all the positions he's been in. He's never been the guy. He's always been the number 2 guy. He's not supremely athletic, but he's a good athlete. And he does really well in this system, and he's going to be out for this season. No telling what that does this late in the season for his season next year. But that is rough to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. When the Rams make that move, they're anticipating being able to ease Odell into that offense and just kind of let him, assimilate and come in and kind of be the third guy. And now he might have to play a bigger role than what they had anticipated, and that means more targets and more opportunity for Odell, which is good for him, trying to reestablish that market value for free agency. When I look at this game's box score, a couple things that stand out to me. One, the 49ers controlled possession handily in this game. They had the ball for about 20 minutes more than the Rams. The best way to stop a good offense is to keep the ball out of their hands. And then, again, I hate to be that guy, but looking at third down efficiency, the 49ers were 8 of 14 and moving the chains on third down. The Rams were 3 of 10. I mean, that's just not good enough. That'll get you beat. You have to execute, especially in short yardage, and be able to move the chains and keep drives alive, keep drives going. And that's what led to the time of possession change. And that's how you get beat 31-10 on Monday Night Football.
Yeah. That's what they call your third down Blevins. Keep bringing on all these third down statistics. Can we talk about how good Trent Williams is?
I mean, how long do we have? I could talk for about 3 hours on Trent Williams.
I mean, to believe that there was ever a time when people were seriously saying, look, he's not that good of a free agent when he sat out for a year. Like, he's, middle of the road. He went from being one of the top left tackles in the game to being middle of the road, or top tackles in the game being middle of the road, being washed up after the injury and all that talk. And then he comes in and just immediately plays really well at his age, which is very impressive. To be able to be out for that long, to come in and just not miss a step in any of his time that he's been back. And he's just not allowing any sacks. He's not allowing that many pressures. He is
a beast in run blocking.
He's a monster.
Send him on a pull and get the heck out of the way. Get behind him, and he will lead you to the promised land. Question, is the Washington-Tampa game on our rundown? We'll be talking in depth about that? Okay. All right, I'll save this little nugget for when that happens then. But, yeah, Trent Williams he's the model of consistency. Like him, Tyron Smith, they're kind of the tackles of the past decade. It seems like they're consistent year in, year out. Even in Washington, a team where he couldn't have been super motivated to keep on keeping on. Being in that offense, you got a revolving door at quarterback, a lot of injuries just around that offense over the years, but he just continues to grind.
Yeah. He is most definitely a stud, and for anybody that likes to watch big Hogmolly type plays in the run game, watch Trent Williams. Fun to watch. And since you brought it up, let's go ahead and talk about Washington beating Tampa Bay. Again, I say this every time that we see the Buccaneers play because I want to make it clear this team is very beatable. And they end up losing to Washington, which is a team that has been up and down, but it didn't come without a sacrifice for Washington. We'll get to that. But this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, of course they're good. They just won the Super Bowl, obviously. But they have their issues that we can't ignore. And they have issues on offense and defense. And they will be in the picture come playoff time. There's just no doubt about that. But, again, it's the same song I keep saying every week. Don't just automatically ship the Buccaneers this year, because they do have some issues. And some of the games, that the matchups that we have in the playoffs that we'll talk about a little bit later, could not end up favoring the Buccaneers.
Yeah, the little nugget that I wanted to talk about, Shefty had tweeted this out November 13th, and I just kind of bookmarked it because I think that this is just so telling of how good Brandon Scherff is. One of my favorite guards in the NFL. I loved him coming out of college. Was praying that he would somehow end up on the Panthers. I just knew that he would be an anchor on the offensive line, and he's done just that in Washington. Schefter tweeted out and said, Brandon Scherff returned Sunday from a knee strain versus Tampa. In the last 3 seasons, Washington has gone 0-12 in his absence. Win percentage with Scherff in the lineup in the past 7 seasons, 49.4. Without him, 13.6%. So they're winning 4 times the amount of games whenever Scherff is in the lineup as opposed to when he's out. And, I mean, we've talked about Trent Williams, Brandon Scherff. It makes you sick to your stomach that they had both of those guys on that offensive line and just had, some shortcomings on offense. You've got some injuries. This year it's Fitzpatrick. They brought him in to be their guy for this season, and he's been hurt from the jump. Years ago, we saw the gruesome injury to Alex Smith, and it's just it's disheartening. So good to have Scherff back. They beat Tampa on Sunday. That's a great win. Happy for Ron Rivera. No one deserves it more. I mean, that his guys are always going to fight regardless of who's on the field. I truly think that he's one of the few coaches that can get the best out of his players regardless of who's hurt, who's banged up, whatever happens. I saw a fight from the Panthers when he was head coach there, when Cam was out. So he's going to get whatever quarterback is on the roster, throw him out there and put him in the best, situation to succeed. He's going to be riverboat Ron and roll the dice. And it's another team that really controlled time of possession was Washington. They had the ball for about 18 minutes more than Tampa. And the best way to beat Tom Brady is to keep the ball out of his hands and keep him on his back. Just ask the Giants.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But you talk about some of the injuries that Washington's had, and it is a team that you cheer for. Even if you're not a Washington fan, you'd like to be able to see Ron Rivera do well. He has a big game this week, heading back into Carolina. We'll talk about that a little bit. But Chase Young is unfortunately going to miss the season, and with an ACL injury, you have to question when he'll come back next year. And it is tragic. You hope that he heals up and he comes back as close as he can to 100%. But with ACL injuries, the treatments are getting better and better, where guys are coming back quicker and quicker and stronger than ever. But you just never know with ACLs. It's different for everybody. So we hope that Chase Young can come back next year healthy, strong as ever, and playing well for the Washington football team, or whatever they're called at that point.
Hopefully they have a name by then.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to talk about Ron Rivera. Let's go ahead and talk about Carolina. Carolina, and I know you were fawning over the Carolina Panthers this week. It had to be something huge for you, and of course it's against the Cardinals. Some of their biggest games have been against the Cardinals throughout Cam's time. And Cam comes back, and really his stat line was not all that crazy. But I was watching the game, and sure enough, one of the first times you see him in the goal line, he runs a touchdown in. He's yelling, "I'm back, I'm back." You see Cam Newton in a number 1 jersey again. Even if the stat line wasn't crazy, it was a really cool energy. there are a lot of Carolina fans. You see like the fans going crazy in the stands. Oh, that's Cam Newton. He's back. Some of those same fans were really happy to get rid of him. So it's a really weird situation there. It's cool to see him come back in. I'm not sure what to expect going forward. I would love to see him come out and play some of his best ball for this half season or whatever he ends up playing for Carolina going forward. But it was just really cool to see him play this game against the Cardinals.
So we know that Darnold is out for probably a month, maybe more, with that shoulder injury. P.J. Walker is a very good backup to have. He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think that Cam Newton can still be a starting quarterback in the NFL, so it makes sense as to why Carolina brought him in. Supposedly, rumor was that they were looking at a 2-year deal, which is surprising to me. But I guess it kind of makes sense if they were to move on from Darnold to have Cam as a possible bridge quarterback into whoever's next, whether that come via trade or the draft. I don't think that Cam's the long-term fix, but it is great to see him back in Carolina to kind of mend that relationship. I don't think he had a lot of resentment with the Panthers, but it just warms your heart because I feel like in this organization's past, I don't think that they've particularly treated the relationship with some of their other stars as well as they could have. Obviously, it's a business. You're going to make business decisions. You're going to make football decisions. But just the way that some things went down with like Julius Peppers and Steve Smith Sr., it kind of rubbed me the wrong way as a fan. And so it's great to see that Cam is welcome back. And all over Facebook and Twitter, everybody that I'm friends with on social media is asking if anyone's selling Panthers tickets for Sunday at Bank of America Stadium for his homecoming, and nobody is giving that ticket up. I think the cheapest that I saw was like $400, $500 that someone was trying to sell. So hot ticket this weekend. It's great to see Cam back out there. Obviously, he was kind of thrown into the fire, not really knowing the Joe Brady offense yet, but I would expect him to start this Sunday. And I think it just adds a whole different dimension. It kind of boosts the spirits of the team. It's a team that started off really hot, looked great. Sam Darnold was moving the ball well, was reading through his progressions well. And then the offense just kind of fell flat on its face whenever McCaffrey got hurt. Darnold had itchy feet. The offensive line had some holes in it.
A lot of drops.
A lot of drops from Robbie and some of the other guys. So I hate to do a crossover here, but my Braves just won the World Series, and a lot of players were talking about how when Alex Anthopoulos, the GM of the Braves, went and traded for Jock Peterson, he brought a swagger in that locker room, a different spirit in that locker room. And he just kind of looked around and said, you guys are just bummed. Like, I need to do something to get you guys going, get you motivated. And Cam Newton is that energy. I truly believe that his energy and his presence in Carolina has elevated other players around him since 2011 when he was drafted. It's awesome that it went full circle. Won the national title in Arizona against Oregon. He made his debut in Arizona and threw for over 400 yards. That was awesome. And, they beat Arizona in the NFC championship years ago. So, like you said, the Arizona, it's only right that was where this was going to happen. And I'm just looking forward to kind of seeing what he can do with this team. Hopefully, if the season ended today, Carolina's looking at a wild card. So, if he can lead this team to the playoffs, it only adds to his legacy in Carolina. He's loved by this fan base, and I'm glad that he's getting a warm welcome back to Carolina.
Yeah. Isn't it cool how that works out? It just happens to be that these coincidences of having the connection to Arizona, just how that happens to turn out. I always like when that happens. It's almost like...
It's a feel-good story. That's why we love sports.
Yeah. Now, there were times in this game where it seems like Brady called the play and Cam got out there and said, I'm just going to run to the right. Is that okay? He's like, all right, yeah, that's fine. Just go for it. And
when you're 6'5", 250 pounds, sometimes you can just kind of draw it up in the mud and just do what you want to do. I mean,
Yeah.
especially short yardage.
Yeah. I really hope that he can stay healthy and that he does finish the season out. Because I would like to see what happens with Carolina going forward. I don't think he's become a better passer in these past couple of years. I think that he hasn't really had the opportunity because there's been injuries, and there were a couple of times those New England games where it's like, okay, he can work in this offense, and he just never really got his footing.
Yeah, I'm not sure
So
that was the best fit for him post Carolina to really dazzle. We'll see.
yeah, so it's one to keep an eye on. We will talk about Carolina again a little bit later, and let's talk about Minnesota beating Los Angeles. The Chargers are on a skid right now. We talked about how that game against Minnesota could be a trap game. It's a very good Minnesota defense, and whatever's going on is still just not working for the Chargers. And Herbert is slowing down a little bit. He's still making some really good throws. These past couple of weeks, even if the team hasn't been winning, he's still been making some really, really good throws going forward. So they had to get back on track. But like we talked about last week, Minnesota was no team to scoff at. This is a team that's very capable. They've been losing some tough games, some close games, that a couple of things go different in those games, and they win them. And then we're talking about a whole different NFC North. So that's a really big win for the Vikings. Tough loss for the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that game, there's only the one turnover by Herbert, the interception. Like you said, making some really big throws. I think that the biggest thing for him is just, again, keeping the chains moving. They only had 253 total yards as an offense, and that just doesn't cut it. We've talked about how good the Vikings defense can be, especially given certain matchups. But, you'd like to be able to move the ball a little bit better, especially playing at home. And if you can't move the ball, then you're going to give the other team good field position. I think that's what kind of happened here is that, Cousins just cashed in on some decent opportunities, and it was enough to get the win.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens going forward for the Chargers. They really need to get it turned around. I think they do have a opportunity to get things turned around towards the end of the season. We'll talk about that as we talk a little bit more about the playoffs. And finally, this one we had a lot of questions about. Didn't know if Aaron Rodgers was going to play. We didn't think that Russell Wilson should play. But Green Bay is able to shut out the Seattle Seahawks 17-0 and beat the Seahawks. That puts a pretty big dent in the Seahawks' hopes at this point, especially when you look at Russell Wilson, who did not look good. He should not have been out there. He's a tough guy. If there's a chance that he can play, he's going to play. And if your medical guy says you shouldn't play, he's going to play. Because you don't tell your franchise quarterback no if he thinks he can play. Problem is, he didn't look great. But the thing is, even an injured Russell Wilson might be a better option than whatever else you got. But he looked rough. The injury definitely seems to be causing some issues for him. He can't get that tight spiral that he usually has. He doesn't throw wobblers, and he threw a lot of wobblers. He couldn't push it down the field. It does not look good for the Seahawks this year and Russell Wilson.
I think that was one of the worst games that I've seen Russell play in years. And it's, I think it does have to do with his hand. I don't think that he was ready to come back. But like you said, with the season on life support, Russell's a competitor. He's going to do what he can to go help his team. And I do think that they're in a better position to win with Russell Wilson, an injured Russell Wilson that's not at 100%, hasn't fully healed, out there, better than being led by Geno Smith. My biggest thing is that looking at this game, the Packers hold the Seahawks to a goose egg. They get that shutout. And it's not like the Seahawks are this terrible offense. It's not like they're, one of the worst offenses in the league. They have some weapons. They have Russell Wilson, even if he's hurt, is better than a lot of quarterbacks that are healthy in this league. So looking at their last two games, goose egg versus the Seahawks, and then against the Chiefs, they only gave up 13 points, and that was without Rodgers. So the Chiefs had tons of opportunities. I think that this Green Bay defense is kind of buying in to that system and really stepping up the last 2 weeks. And it's interesting to see because, I mean, we're about at the halfway mark. And if Green Bay can continue to play that caliber of defense, then I'm really liking my preseason Super Bowl prediction with Buffalo versus Green Bay. I think that if they can play that kind of defense, we talked about the Rams and Bucks, how they've been kind of stumbling. And the Packers keep improving defensively. And correct me if I'm wrong here, won't they get Jair Alexander back at some point?
Yeah. Well, they were able to contain DK Metcalf and the receivers for the Seattle Seahawks without Jair Alexander, which is very impressive. With who they got, Shannon Sullivan and other defensive backs, Kevin King, playing really well for the Packers. Whitney Merciless is out for the year. There was a big scare with Rashawn Gary grabbing his elbow after making a play, hitting the ground, wincing, was rolling around in pain. Turns out it's only a hyperextension, so he's going to be able to come back. Same with Aaron Jones being able to come back. So they really dodged some serious injuries in that game. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch the Green Bay Packers going forward and moving past all the COVID controversy and all that stuff going forward. They are definitely a team to watch. So moving forward, I believe you have the best offensive lines in college football set up for us here. And of course, we talk about successful offensive line, Scherf, the Green Bay Packers with their offensive line, Elton Jenkins. Bakhtiari is not completely healthy. Once they get him back fully healthy, that team's going to be a lot better. Offensive line, it's the lifeblood of a team. You got to be able to stay upright if you're the quarterback. Got to be able to move the ball if you're a running back. But that all starts with the line. As cliche as it sounds, you got to be good up front before you're going to go anywhere. So, let's talk about these college football offensive lines and where they are this season.
Yeah, so looking at this list, it's just the top 5. All 5 teams are above 500. One of the teams is currently vying for a playoff spot. And I would say that 2 of the other teams are probably in line for challenging for a New Year's Six bowl game. So all these teams are having good seasons. There's a correlation between having a good offensive line and having a good team. And so first up, Minnesota. Okay, the Golden Gophers, they've got some absolute hogmollies, some towers on that offensive line. Big Ten football, it's rough. You're going to run the ball a lot more than, say, in the Big 12. It's hard-nosed Northern-style football, and Minnesota does a great job.
And one of the biggest on that Minnesota team, Daniel Falele, is ginormous. 400-some pounds. He might have lost a little bit of weight, but anyway, he'd be 380, about 6'8", 6'9".
He's an ridiculously
monster. Large.
Yep. Second place is Oregon State. I didn't anticipate Oregon State being on this list. I haven't watched a ton of Pac-12 football this year, so that's a team that I need to explore. Third place, Ohio State. I think that was pretty self-explanatory. They've done a great job this season. They always have guys, even if they don't go in the top rounds of the draft, they sneak in the 4th or 5th round, like Michael Jordan that we talked about last week, and then they end up being impact guys at the next level. 4th is Iowa, led by Linderbaum, my guy, who might go top 10 as a center this year in the NFL draft. So they're 4th, and then 5th is Kentucky, led by Kennard, that tackle that we talked about in recent weeks. Looking at this list, it's a lot of Big Ten. You've got the Pac-12 representation with Oregon State, and then SEC with Kentucky. I'm a little surprised that Alabama is not on this list because their collection of talent is just unreal every year, it seems like. But I mean, a lot of NFL talent on these offensive lines, and like I said, all these teams are above 500 and playing bowl caliber football for sure.
Yeah. Another team I'm surprised is not on the list is Georgia. Georgia had been on a lot of lists early in the season, and it's tough to see them not be on a list like that when they have to go against that defense every single practice, and they always have a good run game. Kentucky being on that list is not too crazy. You think about last year, they had a good offensive line last year that helped Jarrett Patterson put up a lot of big stats for that team. So a lot of good offensive lines here. And I stand by this. I think that if you have a great offensive line, you're just going to end up 500 at the very least. It's very few cases are you just going to fall apart if everybody's healthy. On the other side, if you have a bad offensive line but you have a franchise quarterback, you're going to get at least 500. Those are absolutes in sport, in my opinion, in football. And there is a connection between having a good team, having success, and having either a franchise quarterback or a good offensive line to keep everything else going. So it is something to keep an eye on going forward. So let's go ahead. I want to have some time to preview some of these games a little bit later, but we have a couple things to talk about. So let's go on with the big boy shout-outs, and then we'll get on to the previews. So, talk about some of these big offensive linemen. Charles Cross has 553 pass snaps this season. He's playing like a boss. Of those 553 pass snaps, he only has 5 pressures. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. And then for my defensive side, we're looking at Jermaine Johnson II from Florida State. This guy's a super senior, about 260 pounds. He's a mid-round, maybe a little bit earlier in the draft, depending on how he plays. If he keeps playing like this, he's going to have to go earlier than mid-round. He put up 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss in a rivalry game over Miami. Super senior, veteran player in the locker room. We've seen a lot of super seniors put up some pretty good games this season. And you talk about the experience and how much that matters. And he is rising up the draft boards. Of course, super seniors usually on the older end there, and sometimes that factors into the draft decisions. So we'll have to keep an eye on him going forward. But that was a big, big game to get the player of the week in the ACC.
I will say this about Charles Cross. He's had that impressive season, only giving up 5 QB pressures and 0 sacks, playing against some of the premier talent in college football in the SEC. It's not like he's playing cupcake team. He's playing teams like Auburn and Alabama and Georgia and LSU, each of which has NFL caliber guys. So that is really, really impressive. I think he's definitely one of the guys to watch come April, because he should be one of the top 5 offensive linemen taken. And I think this is a great draft class for offensive linemen. We could see 5 or 6 taken in the top 15, top 20. So the trenches are going to get paid come spring. For my big boy shout-outs this week, I want to give a shout-out to another guy, kind of like Trent Williams, and Tyron Smith, that has just been a staple of offensive linemen in the NFL for a while now. And that's Lane Johnson of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm a big believer in offensive linemen being animated, being characters that can kind of, I guess, uplift the offense and kind of give their skilled position guys confidence and guys with big personalities. And Lane Johnson is just that. Watching his game this week against Denver, a big win for Philly, first and foremost. And he had multiple occasions where he's blocking, 10, 15 yards downfield for Jordan Howard for a run that just busts open that defense. And he's the guy that's signaling for the first down, just animated, pumped up, psyched for his guy. And he was instrumental in that win. I love the charisma that he showed, and he's one of my favorites to watch. If you're a young guy, maybe you're still playing football in youth league or in high school or something, and you're watching this podcast, go watch this film and just monitor his footwork in the run and pass game. And he's one of the best in the NFL as far as technique goes.
And he is incredibly athletic.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. On the defensive side of the ball, this is a guy that, when you play Madden and you start a franchise with just a random team with a young core, and you're building and you're using these young guys and trying to develop them, Tennessee is one of the teams that I love to use because they have so much young talent. And so on the defensive side of the ball, 24 years old, Jeffrey Simmons, 6'4", 305 pounds. Another one out of Mississippi State, just like Charles Cross, just on the opposite side of the ball. He is a brutal, brutal force when he can use his hands accordingly. And, he splits double teams. Sometimes they have him out as like a 3 technique. Sometimes as a 5. He kind of moves throughout that defensive line, depending on what kind of look they're given that week. Some of the hybrid looks that Vrabel throws out there. He had a big week this week against the Saints. Had 2 sacks, and it was just a huge factor on that defensive line, creating pressure up the middle. And 2 sacks, 4 tackles, and he's just a leader on that Tennessee Titans defense. And the Titans have won 5 straight. They're currently sitting atop the AFC standings. And if the season were to end of the day, they would have the best overall record, so the 1 seed in a bye week. So he is a big part of that, picking up the slack, improving that defense while Derrick Henry's out so that the offense doesn't have to strain as much. He is a big, big part of that defense.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Simmons as a football player. And he was kind of a steal in that draft for the Tennessee Titans because he had a big injury, missed a lot of time in his rookie year. So they were able to get him a little bit further down than he was supposed to go. There were talks of him being a top 5 player, and they were going to get him a little bit later in that draft. Big steal. And, of course, it took him some time to get on the field because of the injury and getting back into the game. But as soon as he got on the field, he was making plays. And he's really developing into a real good young player for the Tennessee Titans. I'm very interested to see what happens going forward because I do think he can be one of those premier interior defensive linemen. I have to go back and look at that. I think he was in the same class as Quentin Williams.
I think he was 2019. Was Williams 18 or 19? I can't remember.
But I know he was around the same time. But I do think that those both have some upward trending trajectories.
They're still so young. I mean,
yeah, they're very young.
24 years old. I could see a big payday in Simmons' future.
Yeah. And when you look at the rest of the team, and who else are they going to pay right now? And Tennessee's playing really well, but they got some aging pieces that will eventually age out. And it still shocks me how well they're playing without Derrick Henry. I just would not have thought this was going to happen. I thought they were done. I thought they were cooked once Henry went down, but they've still put together some pretty good games. They've still had some big issues there.
I've got a name for you.
Okay.
Simmons reminds me a little bit of a guy that I grew up watching who kind of got lazy after he got his money, Albert Haynesworth. Just an absolute brutal, interior defensive lineman, taking on double teams, clogging up the middle. I think that Simmons is probably a little quicker, a little more athletic and agile. But as far as being a disruptive presence on the Titans' defensive line, at first glance, it could be easy to mistake those two if you hadn't been to a Titans game in years.
Yeah. He's very, very talented. And I believe Haynesworth wear 99 or 90, the same number as Simmons as well.
I think Haynesworth was 92, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's right. It's been a while. But certainly something to bring up. Like you say, Simmons is most definitely more athletic than Haynesworth was. Haynesworth was a pretty big guy and didn't work out once he got his payday. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. So how have we not mentioned Simmons before? Because I was thinking about it in my head. I said, surely we've talked about him. But,
sometimes I'm trying to highlight a lot of college guys. I mean, this is such a talented draft class. I truly believe that this is one of the deepest draft classes in the last 10 years in the trenches. So defensive, offensive line, a lot of talent. We talked about Linderbaum, Charles Cross, Kennard, the offensive tackle at NC State. Is it Ekwonu? Something like that?
I think so.
Still getting familiar with some of the names, but stick with us. By the spring, Caleb and I will be having tons of conversations about these guys, and it's going to be a very, very fun offseason, I think so.
Yeah. And another preview. If you stuck around, thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can keep up all these things. But going forward, we are most definitely going to look at college prospects once we get closer to the offseason and go into the offseason. And once we can figure out this whole technology thing, which is kind of a problem sometimes, we'd like to break down film or have some sort of film breakdown, book study type deal. Talk about some of these offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and really look at that. Because I know personally that's something I like to see going forward is see these big guys get some publicity going into the draft because everybody's talking about quarterbacks and halfbacks and wide receivers. Edge rushers get their love. But the guys in the middle of the field, on the offensive line as well, never get the love they deserve. So we're definitely going to look at that a little bit later. But speaking of previews, let's go ahead and look at this next week. We have about 4 games that I am very, very interested in. So first, we got New Orleans, or Indianapolis and Buffalo. I don't have my glasses on. That IND look a lot like an NO. But Indianapolis versus Buffalo. Buffalo should probably win this game at home. But Indianapolis has been playing pretty well this season. Playing a lot better than some were expecting. Carson Wentz has had ups and downs. Don't know what to expect going forward. Their defense is playing pretty solid. Bobby Okereke is having a really good season. Their secondary is playing well. This Indianapolis team is not a pushover. Could be a potential trap game for Buffalo. They need to win this game at home. It's not going to be easy. But then again, we've also seen this Buffalo team steamroll some teams that we thought was going to be a little bit closer.
I'm really looking forward to this game. And, I'm glad it's the 1 o'clock game. I'm going to have this game on one TV, and I'm going to have the Panthers Washington game on another TV for different reasons. This game, I love the football matchup, the X's and O's side of things, and on the Panthers game, I like the storylines, the media storylines that come in, with Ron going back to Carolina and Cam getting his reception in Carolina. But with this game, I think that obviously this is a rematch of the 2020 playoffs, so that's exciting. I'm sure that we've got certain harsh feelings involved there from some fans. But Carson Wentz has really impressed me this year. He's played better than I thought that he would going to Indy. Looking at his stats right now, he's got a QB rating of 97.9, 17 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. Not necessarily the flashiest guy, but I think he's done a great job in giving the Colts a chance to win in a lot of their games. Had the 2 interceptions against Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, but his last 2 games he's looked very solid. It would be great to see Indy get that offensive line healthy, which is one of the best in the league that we've talked about, Quentin Nelson and Smith and some of these other guys. And I'm looking forward to this game. I think that, like you said, Buffalo should be the favorite at home. They should win this game. But don't be surprised if Indianapolis walks in there a hungry, desperate team. They're 5-5. This would be a huge win for them to solidify themselves as a wild card contender. Technically, they're not out of the race for the division, but the Titans would have to help them out for them to get, in that conversation. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this matchup.
Yep, and this this Colts team looking really good. And, if I am not mistaken, Jonathan Taylor is leading the league in rushing yards, finally eclipsing Derrick Henry. 37, I believe, is what he has.
Henry's been out, 2 weeks? Taylor's tied him.
Oh, okay.
So
he's right there.
Jonathan
Taylor.
Not to discredit Taylor's
sounds like you're
season.
It sounds like you're trying to discredit him.
No, he's had a great season. It's just that Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. So.
Yeah. So that's something to look forward to. It's a very hungry team. It's a very talented team. There's a lot of talent on that Colts roster that just haven't been able to put it together in the past 4 seasons where they put together just a lot of good players. So Bills shouldn't sleep on this team. It's a very talented team. Next, you talk about Washington, Carolina. We've talked about them a lot already. In Carolina, Cam Newton's making his return. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. Carolina's back. Cam is back. Ron Rivera's back. Just like old times, sort of. Is Josh Norman still on the Washington football team, or is he somewhere else?
I think that he is elsewhere. I believe he got cut at the beginning of the season.
That's right. Yeah. I need to make sure, but now that makes sense. I think he's actually in Buffalo now, speaking of that.
All of our back. Former players are in Buffalo, it seems like.
Yeah. Charlotte Tulaway and others.
I forget who it was. Someone in Washington, I think it was a Washington player, was saying that, basically saying like it's a homecoming, and that basically all of the players in Carolina, Washington, and Buffalo know each other because McDermott and Rivera have taken so many of our former players with them when they leave. Philly Brown, Curtis Samuel, Latulele, tons of different guys. So, I have goosebumps thinking about a potential Cam Newton rushing touchdown, him strutting to the sideline and doing the famous Superman celebration, and then handing the ball off to the kid in the stands, doing what he used to do. I'll say this, and then I'll shut up about Carolina. I know I've talked a lot about Carolina this podcast, but McCaffrey, if you saw McCaffrey after Newton's touchdown in Arizona, McCaffrey's not an animated guy. He's probably the most vanilla football player you will ever see. Doesn't celebrate a ton. When he scores a touchdown, he just does this and points up to the sky. That's all he does. When Cam scored, he went berserk. It was like he had an out-of-body experience, jumping up and down, celebrating like you would not recognize McCaffrey. And so I think that just speaks, again, to the energy that Cam's brought this team. So I'm excited to see it back in Carolina.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a big game. Hopefully it's a close one. Hopefully nobody gets blown out. A lot of things to look for in this game. Very excited to see this. We'll most definitely be watching this one. Another big game. Maybe the biggest game of the week. This is a big game for both the teams involved. Has some big implications going forward. But Dallas playing at Kansas City. Normally, we would say that Kansas City at home, tough to win, but they've already lost a couple of games this season at home. They're starting to get things to go together a little bit better at this point in the season. But this is not a bad Dallas team. As much as my history would make me want to root against the Cowboys here or think that they don't have a chance or undervalue some of their performances, they just have a really good offense. You can't deny that. They have a really good offense, really good receiving, good quarterback play. The defense is starting to get it together. This is a really good Cowboys team. And they're looking more and more like they're going to make a good playoff run here. But beating this Kansas City team is a huge step towards being one of the contenders in the NFC. And after watching the Kansas City Chiefs play a battered Green Bay team without Aaron Rodgers and put up the 14 points they did, I'm not sure what to expect here. They still have their issues, and they haven't seemed to fully address those issues. They're starting to get back on track, and now they're in the lead of the AFC West, but things can change. They still have the issues they've had all season, but now we have to see if Dallas can win this game. This is a big, huge game of the week type game, and it might be the game of the week. I haven't looked to see exactly what it is, but
I believe
it has
it
to be up
is.
there.
Yeah, it's on Fox. I think it's Fox's game of the week, America's game of the week, whatever they call it. I'm thrilled that this is the 4:30 game because I'll have Buffalo and Indianapolis at 1, Carolina obviously at 1 versus Washington. 4:30 we got Dallas and Kansas City. That's going to be the one I have my eyes on. You also have Arizona and Seattle. But super excited for this game. Like you said, if Dallas can go out and get a statement win on the road at Kansas City, think about the boost for their morale. Set them up at 8-2, and they have a pretty easy schedule, if I'm not mistaken, to finish out their season. A lot of division games, and their division's not very strong. They could put the league on notice by beating Kansas City at Kansas City, but I don't think they're going to. Watching Kansas City this past week versus the Raiders, almost said Oakland, versus Vegas, their offense looks like it has kind of found its rhythm again. I thought that this past week was the most that Kansas City has looked like themselves in a very long time, and I think that you're going to have a big game from Travis Kelce. Seems like he's always there whenever Mahomes needs him in the red zone. He just has a tendency to just some of these block and release routes that he runs. It's like the defense always gets lulled to sleep and just forgets about him. I guess because of Tyreek and some of the other weapons around him, but it'll be interesting to see if Dallas's linebackers and their safeties can play on Kelce. I think Kelce's going to have a big game. I think the Chiefs are going to sneak out a victory against a really good Dallas team.
Yeah, and we'll look at these games again and make our picks here towards the end. But Kansas City, in order to turn this around, they really need a run game. They got to get something going. They got to get something going there because you could be the best, but if they're only rushing 3, if most of the teams are rushing 3 and just putting all these guys in coverage, I don't care how good you are. You can't do that. You can't play the numbers game down on the numbers and expect to get guys open, no matter how talented they are. You look at Green Bay, they've really started just focusing on the run game this year. They know Aaron Rodgers can do whatever he wants to when he comes down to passing. But they want to make sure they get this run game with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon going. And Kansas City's just not been able to do that. And it has made Patrick Mahomes look human. Now, they have to get that run game going to make this work. Last game we got, Pittsburgh at Los Angeles against the Chargers. The Chargers are, like we said, on a skid. This is a big return game. This is going to be a tough defense. Don't know about the health with T.J. Watt. We know that he has the hip injury, so we don't know what to expect with that. If he's out, it'll be very unfortunate for football fans and Steelers fans. But if, no matter what the health is, no matter what the situation is for Pittsburgh, Los Angeles needs to win this game. They cannot keep falling behind. You don't want to get too far behind in the playoff standings. They need to win this game. They need to get it figured out.
Yeah, I think this is a very pivotal time for the Chargers. Obviously it's a big game. You want to win at home. You want to beat a team that you're capable of beating. I haven't heard about Roethlisberger's status for this game. Regardless, we know that Pittsburgh's defense is going to show up because they always do. They're going to keep it relevant. We did talk a little bit earlier about the T.J. Watt injury. Curious to see what that looks like, if he is going to be able to play in this game or if he's going to be held out. It was scary when he went down this past week. Hopefully he can go. And if you look at the Chargers' schedule after this week, You got a game versus the Broncos, the Bengals, the Giants. Still have a game against the Texans. So it's if they can win tonight, then maybe they can keep the Chiefs at bay and win that head-to-head matchup and still have a chance at the division. But it does kind of feel like the tides have turned in that division, and now the Chiefs are in the driver's seat and the Chargers are right behind them.
Yeah.
So it'll
So
be interesting to
definitely
see.
the biggest games this week. Well, let's go ahead and make our picks here. We got 4 picks. Mine, I'm going to go with Buffalo over Indianapolis. I do think it's going to be a very hungry Indianapolis team, but I do think Buffalo is going to be the dominant team and win the game. It shouldn't be a blowout, but maybe a 2-score game. Carolina, Washington.
I think this feels like one of those games where Buffalo just kind of has their way in a 1 o'clock game at home. Something like 31-24 or something like that. So I'll pick Buffalo as well.
Okay. So we're in agreement there. Washington, Carolina. I'm interested where you go here. I think that in Cam's return, whether it's Cam's doing or not, I think that this is a beaten up Washington team. Does not mean they're out of it, because Washington and Carolina, again, you talk about some of their coincidental great games over the years. They've always had some really good games against each other. I think Carolina's going to win this. Now, whether that's Cam's doing or not, I think they can put up a pretty good showing.
Yeah, I got Carolina winning this. I don't think that Cam's going to have to do too much. I think that he'll be, decent for us. I think he'll look like this is his first week in a new offense because it really is. But I think that the Panthers' defense is just going to be too much for Washington. Even with Scherf back, I think that the edge rushers are going to, Reddick and Burns are going to be able to eat against that Washington offensive line and get to Taylor Heineke and just kind of make it a long Sunday for him.
Yep, absolutely. Now, this is where we're going to differ because you've already given yours for the Kansas City-Dallas game, but I think Dallas is going to win this game. I think this is the key game. This is going to be a marquee type game for Dak Prescott, one of those legacy games going against Kansas City. Super Bowl runner-up from last year, Super Bowl champion from a couple of years ago. Dak Prescott coming back after the injury, turning this Dallas Cowboys team around. Huge game in Kansas City, pulling off the win that I think most people don't think they could.
Yeah, I got Kansas City winning this game, but I think that this might be one of the best regular season games of the year. Would not surprise me if this comes down to the last possession. I think that in that last possession, Mahomes is able to win the big one at home.
High scoring or low scoring?
High scoring, something like 34. We'll go 34-30. Kansas City.
I can see that. I could see something like 35-31, end up with that, not be able to get the game-winning drive at the end. And then Pittsburgh at L.A. I have the Chargers winning. I think they get this turned around. This is a beat-up Steelers team. If Big Ben's not playing and if T.J. Watt's not playing, it's going to be tough. Even under a well-coached team, we saw what they looked like against the Lions with those injuries. I think this team is too talented to fall to a team like that at this junction in the season. So I have the Chargers winning and getting things turned back around and hopefully getting things going for the Chargers.
Yeah, I don't think there's an official word yet for Ben, but I do know that he has been meeting with the team virtually, so that doesn't look like a good sign. I'm guessing that Rudolph's going to get the start, and if that's the case, I think this hungry Chargers team, a team that kind of had their grip on the division a couple of weeks ago, that has now lost 3 of their last 4. They come out at home hungry, desperate for a win, and they get it on Sunday Night Football. So I got Chargers over the Steelers. I think it'll be a fairly low-scoring game, something like maybe 23-17, but should be a decent Sunday night matchup.
Yeah. All right. So what we didn't get to talk about was the playoff preview. Look at some of these potential matchups going forward. So we'll push that off to either next week or the week after that. Another thing we're going to talk about pretty soon is the playoff. The fantasy playoffs that are also going to be coming around the bend pretty soon. And we'll get Ryan back on to talk about some fantasy outlooks here and what the fantasy playoffs might be looking like. But if you stuck around or tuned in at any point and you're listening to me right now, make sure you like and subscribe if you want to hear more about this stuff. And if you disagree or agree with anything we said, make sure you leave a comment wherever the comment section may be. Thank you for watching. We might be back next week. Next week's a very busy, very strange week, Thanksgiving week. If we are not back next week, please have a great week with your family. Whoever you surround yourself with, have a great, great week. We will try to be back in some fashion next week at some point. Thank you for watching. Hogmolly Hustle, tuning out.